started tweaking Renaults back in the mid-1950s and then went on to make their own standalone models, like the A110. Always driver focused, always low volume, and often blue. In this film, I'm going to review the hottest iteration of the recently revised Alpine range, the A110S. I want to find out if the best sports cars in 2022 are actually the smallest, lightest, and possibly with the littlest of engines. I'm Jonny Smith. Welcome to the Late Break Show. Depending on your generation, you'll either think of an Alpine as one of these, the car on which this is modelled on, or one of these, an A610, never badged as an Alpine, badged as a Renault, because at the time Chrysler were using the Alpine name for a Talbot, a very beige, clattery car. I last drove an Alpine when the big A brand was rekindled for 2017, and I actually reviewed it on another channel I'm associated with, Smith and Sniff. In fact, if you've never heard of the podcast Smith and Sniff, it's actually the most successful automotive podcast in the UK, so maybe you want to listen to it every Monday. But nevertheless, me and Rich Porter decided this is an unashamedly French car that's very charming, very simple, and very light. And talking of light, that's why I haven't got my Car Pervert notebook today. I've got some pieces of paper because it's light. Lightness then. About 1,100 kilos, and there are three models, and these are the three: the normal A110, the GT, and this one, the S. 4.2 to 4.5 seconds to 62, and between 255-56 horsepower up to this, the 300 horsepower. Same engine, 1.8, 16 valve, turbo, same gearbox, 7-speed, wet clutch, double pedal thingy. Rear wheel drive, obviously, engine's there. For me, the fascination of the little Alpine is that it doesn't weigh much, which therefore means, a bit like old Lotus back in the old days, that means you don't need as much power to thrust it along. You can use almost all of its power on the roads, and because it's nimble, it doesn't feel like you're running out of road width, which you do with a lot of sports cars now, a lot of cars in general. There's a piece of glass just there, and that's all that divides you between the 1.8 turbocharged 16 valve, which doesn't feel that turbocharged, and in the GT and the S iteration, just under 300 horsepower, as standard about 250 horsepower in the entry-level 49 grand model. So the S, especially at low speeds, stuff like this, it is a significantly firmer car. The one thing that I really liked about the previous version, the 2017 version, certainly in GT form, was the ride. The ride quality was lovely, and because the car isn't very heavy, it's just very pleasant on B roads. This S version is about 19% stiffer, they say, slightly sharper, and with a recalibrated engine that seems to come alive above sort of 5,000 RPM. Now the balance is wonderful, I have to say. It's one of the things that will attract you to the Alpine. If you don't like kind of lightweight, frisky balance, you won't see the point of buying a car like this. A little bit ironic that I'm testing an Alpine in what appears to be alpine conditions. We've had snow this morning and frost, hail, now a bit of very cold rain. It's bitter out there. It's bitter out there. But it's warm in here with my microfiber optional dash, my Sabelt bucket seats, which are really comfortable, I have to say. Yeah, they are. They're very comfortable. Big deep sills because you sit right down in this car. Although it's not quite as low as I'd like it to be. You can't adjust these bucket seats. They're in a fixed position with the sort of skeletal mount construction. One of the revisions of this latest Alpine is the infotainment. There's better connectivity apparently, and when I go into, when I go into applications, there's something called Alpine Telemetrics. Couldn't remember how to say it. Alpine Telemetrics, that's new for this model. Gives you things like engine speed, torque curve, you know, throttle position. It's it's okay. And when you put it in track mode, which is when you hold the sport mode button down, there we go. Then we're suddenly in track mode. Now, if you're buying an Alpine, you can't buy a 3-pedal Alpine. You haven't been able to since this car launched. So this is 7-speed Getrag gearbox with paddles here, and it will keep defaulting to auto until you double tap the D button, and then it will hold it in the shift with these metal tabs. Now I remember from the last car, although the steering wheel looks wonderful, I can never quite work out where I want to put my hands. I'd like to drive it like this, but this bit's too fat. Up here where the nodules are that they want you to drive, then I don't feel like I've got the shift paddles quite up where I want them. I kind of want these lower down. I want to hold the wheel lower down. I don't know if it's just me. Answers on a postcard. Also on the steering wheel, you've got these huge buttons for cruise control, which I won't use very often in a car like this. Whereas volume and stuff like that for the infotainment is right around the back on this ancient stalk, which dates back to Lagunas, stuff like that. It's also on my long-term Renault Zoe, same cluster. In fact, there's lots of shared componentry all over the place. If you're going to be picky about componentry, this car does not have premium componentry. But what it does have is lightness, and the lightness does translate to fun. So I would love to try this car with a little manual personally. So when I double tap this, there, M for manual. You can't really tell it's turbo. I mean, I'm listening quite intently here. You get a tiny whoosh when you come off the gas, but very, very linear delivery, like a lot of modern turbos are. What do you think of the fire orange? It's a new colour for Alpine. There's a selection of new optional colours actually. They're a cost option, but it looks amazing when the sun comes out, which it's sort of doing now and again today. It's a bit off and on. This B-road activity is when the Alpine really comes alive, I think. Because it's not heavy, it skips over any bad bumps. It hops and skips. There is a reason why people like television's James May and famous designers Gordon Murray and always going on about Ferrari's Nick Mason own these cars. They've all got Alpines because it's not a commonly seen breed of car. Cars aren't light anymore. Look at the Jag F-Type. It's all aluminium like this, but it weighs like 1,800, 1,900 kilos for a 2-seat car. So all the Alpines have been recently revised. What is the S? The S is 60,000 quid, more expensive than the GT, stiffer than the GT, and it's got extra aero front and rear for increased downforce. Alpine is a mid-engine car, as I said, but it has got a boot at the back and the front, both of which are quite small. I think this is 96 litres, and it's a weirdly shaped thing. It's like a bell jar. You can, or like a pre-formed pond, you can get regular sized bags in, probably get 2 of those in. Yeah, at least 2 of those in. And the front is about 100 litres, very shallow. It's not going to bother the Boxster for packaging. There is a bit of storage actually behind the seats, which I forgot about, and a little bit of storage in the middle here. Open the door shuts and it'll say this is made in Dieppe. This is a very French car. The switch gear is, these toggles are different. Everything else is sort of Renault part spin, perhaps Dacia part spin. So if you're bothered about that might dissuade you. It's the package, and the package is such that it's a car that I actually think it's a car that you wear. So I'm putting on a really flattering jumper or hoodie that just fits right, or a coat, and you just go, yeah, I like this, it works for me. This car works for you, and I think more people need to get in and try it. The front holds the road so well. This is obviously on the extra sticky tyres. That's a Renault Zoe. There's a lot of the switchgear out of that in this. Not necessarily a bad thing. The biggest challenge, I think, for Alpine is people knowing about the car and ever seeing a car. We had them displayed at the Manchester Late Break Show event last year, and it looked amazing. In fact, I had a guy come up to me and say, I've just ordered one. I'd never seen one in person, but I thought I'd like it, and I've decided to commit and get one, which is great news. Now, what does this compete against? Obviously, mid-engine Porsches like the Cayman, but also the box fresh Lotus Emira, which has a little bit more power from its Mercedes AMG 4-cylinder engine, but a lot more weight, some 1,400 kilos versus 1,100 kilos. So this is the more Lotusy car. It's more Lotusy than a Lotus, in a way. What would be amazing, I think, is if they made a rally version of this, because the original Alpine A110S made glorious rally cars. Imagine if they went a bit kind of aerial nomad with this. That could work. Although the infotainment and stuff has been revised, don't expect it to be really in depth, because it sort of isn't. This is not a car for that. This is a car to just enjoy the driving experience, enjoy that steering. Enjoy getting to know all the power that the chassis can give you. This is an aluminium car, so it won't rust. That's how they've got the weight down. It's possibly not going to be too expensive to repair because it doesn't use loads of composites. So the GT Alpine and this one, the S, have got more power. Nearly 300 horsepower, 296 horsepower, but you can't see the engine. The engine's in there behind a sort of release panel, which I can't get to. So you can see a bit through this grille here, and obviously you can hear it when you drive. The main element of the S is that recalibrated engine, which seems to come alive at the higher end of the rev range, but also is the stiffer chassis. This is a 19% stiffer car than the other ones in the range. Okay, 0 to 60 then, 4.2, let's go. Oh. In track mode, the fast shift of this Getrag 7-speed actually is really intense. It thumps through the gears. It's unashamedly 4-cylinder, which is something I remember liking about the previous car. You can only get it in one engine type, and it is what it is. Unlike sort of where the Cayman has been criticised for going from 6 cylinders down to 4, which people feel like is a bit, you know, apologetic. This is great. It sounds great. It's a small engine. You can get reasonable economy out of it. You know, like over 40 if you really want. Come on, man. You're getting a bit of whine. It almost sounds like interference on the radio. Makes you think that you're on a rally stage. It's coming from my right ear, I don't really know where. It's the engine somewhere. Some bloke called Chris Harris accidentally set one of these on fire on Top Gear. Not because he didn't want to, he didn't realise it was on fire, but still loved it. Satisfaction is something really important when you're buying a sports car. You've got to feel satisfied. It's got to deliver fulfillment, because you don't need to buy a car like this. You don't need to own a car like this. I think where it starts to get a little bit sticky is the price of the Alpine. I think it scares a lot of people. You know, 50, 60,000 quid. 70 as tested with some of these options on this particular car. These Brembo 320mm brakes, fantastic because they've not got a lot of work to do because it's light. Steering feel is wonderful. You can dig in and then dig in again. Don't get understeer at all. And I'm never once left thinking that that engine doesn't feel special enough because it's right for this package. It just feels right. Screen's bijou. There's enough going on in there. As long as it talks to your phone and you can put your phone on this and charge it down there on a little padded mat out of the way, that's fine. No cup holders on the Alpine. No, it wants you to just focus on driving. In fact, there is a slot back there. You could call that a cup holder, I suppose. And there's a satchel thing. This is a great idea, a sports car that fits in normal parking spaces, that has a good turning circle, that probably isn't going to be that heavy on brakes and tyres compared to most, that you can get reasonable MPG out of, so you could use it regularly. It's not going to rust, because it's aluminium. So, aesthetics. What I love about the Alpine is, aside from the fact that it doesn't look massively different from the revised version, the 2017 relaunched version, this S obviously has the extra aerodynamic aids, and it has these different wheels, which personally I don't like any of the Alpine wheels. I think the wheels could have been made a little bit more retrospective, like this design here, because I really like these. I love this creased kind of bridge nose. It looks like the nose of my tortoise, weirdly. And the crease goes down the middle of the roof here. These little ears, these intakes, I love this curved window. Can you see it, that quarter window there, where the air gets fed into the 1.8 turbo 16 valve there. And then these extra gills here, which is a little bit of a sort of Porsche Targa about it here. The aero that makes the S, visually I'm not that bothered about. I almost prefer it as a sort of simple ducktail. But there you go. For every 200 Boxsters, 200 Caymans you'll see on the road, you might see one Alpine in the wild. It's different, isn't it? And it's pleasantly small. It's a car that's appropriately proportioned for roads like what we have in Great Britain. The big A on the fuel filler cap on that side. Like, you open the door and it's so light. Because it is light. This is an all aluminium car with a smattering of carbon fibre here and there like that. There's the front boot. I think this is 100 litres. It's very shallow, so you can fit a shallow case in it, or a couple of soft holdalls. I've done the school run a few times this week. The kids think it's funny that it's got two boots. It's not going to bother a Boxster, like I said. I've got no idea what the engine looks like because it's buried in there somewhere. Is that 4.2 seconds to 62? Significantly better than 4.5 of the base model. Is it worth 10 grand more having this slightly stiffer suspension and having these seats? Is it worth 10 grand more in a car which you're already thinking is quite an expensive car anyway, despite the fact that it's bespoke? It is bespoke. I do feel like I'm on a rally stage a little bit. I can kind of hear it's sort of like a combination of turbo inhalation and radio interference. It sounds like when you're on a rally stage and there's the onboard camera going left over crescent, right. Porsches, common. Too common. So yeah, this Alpine is an improvement over the previous Alpine in little increments all over. Do I still like it? I still like it an enormous amount. An enormous amount. Do I still miss having a manual gearbox? Yes, I do. I would like that as an option. I think it's a shame that that isn't offered. There's an unpretentious coolness and intrigue to the A110. Not enough people know what it is or who Alpine are, and that plays to the advantage of buyers seeking exclusivity. You have to test drive one. These are special cars. No glitz, fuss or glamour, just a carefully crafted, bespoke joy machine. The A110 delivers fun and fulfillment because it follows the ethos of lightness that so few brands do today. For me, the entry-level 49 grand car is probably the sweet spot. You will not be disappointed. And with that 10 grand saving, you could afford a Renault Sport Megane R26, not that you'd need one. Thanks for watching the Late Break Show. Why not become a Patreon and get early access to these videos for a few quid a month? There's a link in the description.